Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy, where we talk about all things play therapy. And today we're going to be talking about using play therapy with adolescents. And so there's this misbelief out there that play therapy is only for adolescents. And it makes sense because it's got the word play in it, right? And traditionally, play therapy was developed for children, a way to help children heal any of their social, emotional, mental health issues. But is play therapy helpful for teens? Can you use play therapy effectively with teens? And I find play therapy to be really helpful with teens. I use it all the time and have really, really good results using play therapy with my adolescent clients and teaching others how to use play therapy with adolescent clients. So maybe the question isn't, can play therapy be useful for adolescents? I think the question needs to be reframed as, how is play therapy useful with your adolescent clients? So if you have adolescent clients that you are having a hard time getting them to open up, and maybe they seem like, your thoughts are, oh, they're resistant, or my favorite, not really, which is they're not ready for therapy. Maybe that's true. I haven't found it to be true as often as I hear it, which is pretty regular. Because think about it, adolescents aren't, we're using traditional talk therapy with adolescents who aren't adults. Traditional talk therapy was developed for adults, and we're using a model designed for adults with adolescents. And adolescents developmentally are not quite adults, right? Their prefrontal cortex is still in progress. They're still working on all those neural connections together. We also know that adolescence is a time of tremendous neural growth, right? There's so many changes going on during adolescence, and it can be really overwhelming, which means they're not necessarily going to have access to those higher cognitive levels. And yet we're expecting them to talk about things. And if you have a pretty high functioning adolescent, it'll work. I talk with my adolescent clients. I don't necessarily start there, though. When we're trying to work through difficult issues, that's where they tend to get stuck. So if you have clients who you're having a hard time getting them to go to that deeper level, or to be able to work around some of those high intense emotion topics, then I find play therapy to be a really useful way to go about helping them work through that. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. What are some, how, when my mouth works, I'll be able to get this out. How can play therapy be effective with adolescents? So we're going to be talking about, how do you introduce play therapy to adolescents? How are you choosing activities for adolescents? How are you holding that therapeutic space for adolescents so they don't feel like they're being treated like little kids? And how do you make sure play therapy is effective for your adolescent clients? So if that sounds like it's something that would be useful for you, then stay tuned, because that is what we were going to be talking about today. So I'm Kathy Spooner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist. If you haven't been following any of my podcast episodes or live stream episodes, then I'll just kind of introduce myself if you're new to any of my episodes. And I want to invite you, if you're a play therapist or you're a mental health professional and you're working with adolescents, then I want, or maybe you want to be able to work with adolescents, I want to invite you, if you're watching the live stream, I want to invite you to introduce yourself. What population do you work with? Are you working with adolescents? How are you working with adolescents? Are you using play therapy with adolescents? What are your questions about that? So if you are watching, and I live stream on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you're watching, and you're working with adolescents, then post that in the comments. If you're watching the replay on LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram, feel free to join the conversation or message me. I would love to hear your feedback and your questions, or your thoughts about this topic. What works for you, and how are you making a difference using play therapy with your adolescent clients? So let's get started for today. So the topic that we are discussing today is what are the best strategies to use play therapy with adolescents? The first thing you want to think about is, how are you setting the stage with your adolescent clients? How are you introducing play therapy to your adolescent clients in a way that doesn't make them feel like you're treating them like a baby or you're treating them like a little kid, which will make you feel awkward, and they'll probably feel awkward, and then it'll feel really awkward and not so fabulous. The way to think about introducing play therapy with adolescents is, really don't say we're going to play, or because your language really matters. So the way that I typically introduce play therapy to my adolescent clients, typically um some of them I will try to talk with first, because they really kind of need to talk to you. Other ones, if they're shut down from the beginning and they do not want to be there, or they've had bad experiences in therapy with previous therapists, then I'll just use, like, play therapy to get them started. I try to make it fun, because we know that if they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to engage. And if they're not feeling comfortable, it means that it doesn't really feel safe. So the first order of business is, how do I create a sense of safety in the session? For some adolescent clients, that's going to be talking to them a little bit. And for some clients, it means maybe doing some experiential things. And so I like to say that I use expressive arts with my adolescent clients. And so what I'm going to be doing is, I'm thinking about how to help my clients access the therapeutic powers of play, because that's what sets play therapy apart from other expressive arts modalities. So, how are we helping them access those therapeutic powers of play using a theoretical model within the context of a strong therapeutic relationship? And we can use expressive arts to help them access those therapeutic powers of play. So, the way that I'll introduce it is, maybe we're talking about something and I'll say, hey, I have this idea. Let's try something different. We're going to use art, or let's use the sand tray, or let's use music. And let's try this and use art or music or sand tray. Let's see what happens. Or I may say something like, one of the things that I found useful in working with my adolescent clients is to use some expressive arts activities, because we can kind of explore different things using art or music. Or sometimes I'll say, sometimes if I feel like they're getting stuck and they're not um, they're kind of shutting down, or they're getting a little frustrated, or you're feeling like they're not really engaging, then that's when I usually pull out the expressive arts activities and I'll say, let's try something different. Sometimes it's a little easier to use the sand tray and see what happens. And then that's typically how I'll introduce it, because here's the thing that we're going for. If we're using play therapy with adolescents, then we're making a foundational shift in our way of thinking. And that shift is away from traditional talk therapy that's going to require your adolescent clients to really get into those cognitive areas to gain insight. And maybe they're not quite there. So we're kind of moving from focus on talking and accessing those cognitive areas for insight and problem solving through talking is the only way to get healing, to using expressive modalities to help them work through some of those shifts. And if we're using these expressive modalities like art or music or clay or sand tray, and we can help them access those therapeutic powers of play for self-expression, problem solving. Maybe you're doing some slow exposure work to a challenging topic, or maybe you want them to explore some of their decision making. You can use these symbolic forms to accomplish that using expressive modalities. And then that's going to help to access those implicit experiences that they don't quite have words for. If you've worked with adolescents, maybe you've worked with adults. I have. And adults, if you ask them, how are you feeling about that? A lot of adults, they don't know. They have no idea how they feel about it. And so sometimes we're asking adults to access explicit experiences, those we have conscious awareness for, when it's actually stored away in implicit experiences. And so if we use these symbolic forms of expression first and foremost, talking later, expression first, then we can bypass some of those areas where they get stuck. And so that's, to me, when I think about it that way, that's that foundational shift in my way of thinking about how to help my clients. Talk therapy is not the end all be all, especially when you're dealing with adolescents, and especially pre-adolescents, like maybe those like preteens or maybe early teens, like middle school age, that are even less developed prefrontal cortex areas. And so when I think about it that way, then it makes it a little easier for me to know how to introduce it. And so the second thing is, how are you going to choose the activities? So when you're thinking about the activities, because now we know we're going to help them use expression first before talking. We want to help them symbolically represent what's going on. Then now we want to think about how to go about doing that. What activities are going to be the most beneficial? And so I would say that really depends on the interests of your clients. This is where getting to know your clients is going to make a big difference. So most teenagers like music. Most teenagers like using art to express themselves. But a lot of times what you have to overcome is the idea of art has to be a certain way. And we're not grading art. We're not grading music. There's no grade here. And it's however you want it to be. There's no wrong way to do it. So when I'm kind of introducing it that way, there's no wrong way to do this. However you do it, it'll be just fine. We may be, if I know they like, I'll usually start with music. like, what's your favorite artist? And so we may talk about their favorite artist. We may even go on YouTube. I may have them um, tell me one of their favorite songs. We may pull that up. If it's got explicit language, I might consider their parents and how their parents feel about that. So if I feel like their parent, or maybe, maybe you're not somebody who really likes the explicit language, because we have to rely on that therapeutic relationship. So if you hearing all the bad words is going to create some incongruence for you and some internal distress, then ask them to look up the clean version of the song, because YouTube will have clean versions. So listen to the song together, ask them what they like about the song, what's meaningful about the song, kind of open up exploration that way. Then you can use music for different activities. Like you can even on YouTube or probably on Google find the lyrics to the song, and then you can have them pick out the lyrics in the song that is most meaningful to them. And then now you've got the beginnings of a brand new song lyric, or what I also would say, poetry, because I kind of look at song lyrics as poetry. So now you can begin there, or you can pick out those lyrics and have them create a sand tray that represents those lyrics using as few or as many of the sand tray miniatures as makes the most sense. You can tell them it doesn't always make sense why you feel drawn to specific miniatures. Just go with it. I promise you, there's no wrong way to do this. However it ends up being is exactly how it ends up being. That's kind of how you get them out of that little stuck space about using expressive arts. But also kind of helps them know, in here, we're not grading. This is not school. We're not grading art. We're not being judgmental. I say this is a no judgment zone. My mouth's not working today. This is a no judgment zone. And in here, we're not judging ourselves. And I'm not judging. You can have them take that song lyric and use clay to represent, like, what would that, if you were to give that song lyric or that part of the song, if you were to create a symbol to best represent it, what would that symbol look like? You can have them use clay to do that, or draw it. A lot of times I'll give my clients a choice between drawing and using clay or using the sand tray. So these are you're choosing the activities based on what their interests are, and then you're kind of starting there. And from there, it tends to go pretty easy after that, once they get used to doing that in session. And then the next thing is, now that we have figured out how to introduce, we have that fundamental shift in our way of thinking about how therapy works, meaning it doesn't have to be talk therapy. We can use expressive modalities to access those therapeutic powers of play within the context of a strong therapeutic relationship using a theoretical model. And so now we're thinking about, how are we holding that therapeutic space? The thing to think about when we're using symbolic representation or expressive modalities, we want to make space for permission to be expressive, which is why I do a lot of, in here, it's a no judgment zone. However you do it is exactly the right way. There's no wrong or right way to do it. And so we want to establish that sense of permissiveness in the session with your clients, especially in the beginning, because we know that they're not going to engage unless they feel safe. We need to create that safe therapeutic space. So we're not going to rush them. I can't tell you how many adolescent clients that I have had who have had not so great experiences with therapy, or maybe they're court involved and their probation officer said they had to and they don't want to, or maybe they're torn because they know their parents aren't happy about having them go to therapy, or maybe they're a little worried about parents finding out and then parents getting mad that they've talked about the family issues outside of the family, like they're telling the family secrets. So they're a little guarded about what's going on, or maybe they've had bad experiences in therapy in the past, or maybe they're slow to warm up. These are all the things. We are holding therapeutic space for all the possibility of these things. And we want to make sure that teens feel like it's going to go at their pace, that we're going to be respectful of their needs. This is where I like using a neuroscience and attachment lens when I'm working with clients, including adolescent clients, and I'm using play therapy to help them access those therapeutic powers of play. And I'm using more of an integrative model, and probably the core, I would say, of that therapeutic model is looking at this through a neuroscience and attachment lens to help me understand what is going on with my client and what they need. And so I'm picking up on their cues, I'm tapping into my resonance circuits to figure out really what's going on, as well as how am I pacing this? Am I allowing my clients to go at a pace that's comfortable to them? And are they feeling comfortable to just create? And that takes time sometimes for some clients. So sometimes we need to just sit with them and we need to be comfortable with them not doing much and checking you out, really, to see if you're going to be one of those adults, right, who judges them, looks down on them, thinks they're a bad kid, and says they're resistant or reluctant. They're going to pick up on your nervous system. So you have to be comfortable with just being, which is one of the reasons. So I use an integrative model with adolescent clients. So once they start getting like age 9 and 10, I'm usually shifting from child-centered play therapy to more of an integrative model. One of the things that I love about child-centered play therapy is you have to learn how to just be, because you are allowing clients to lead and you're following, and you have to be really comfortable with being fully present in the moment, attuned, congruent with unconditional positive regard, and then seeing how the session unfolds as you follow. That's one of the things I find really useful about child-centered play therapy, and it also comes in handy with working with adolescents when you're using an integrative model. So when I was thinking about work with adolescents, and I was thinking about if I'm using an integrative model, then I need some kind of framework to help me know how to pull all of this together, which is and so I created it's kind of an acronym, B5. There are 5 ways of being in the session to create that strong therapeutic space. So I do have a training coming up, and I'll talk a little bit about that, where we kind of take all of this way of being, how are we using a therapeutic framework, what therapeutic framework are we using to help ground the work that we're doing, because your therapeutic model is going to influence how you create that therapeutic space. It's going to influence what you say in session. How are you in session? What are you focusing on in the session? And what does that look like from beginning to end? So if you're interested, I do have a training coming up, play therapy with adolescents using expressive arts. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. And so now we know how to use this therapeutic space. We know how to introduce, and then how are we making sense of what happens in play therapy sessions? And to me, this is probably where most play therapists struggle. I know it's where I struggled in the beginning. This is where, to me, consultation comes in really, really handy. Honestly, even if you're a seasoned play therapist, I think being part of a community of support that's going to help you make sure you're on the right track with your clients as you're also looking at themes in the play therapy session. You have support to do that, and kind of making sure that your understanding is on target. And then what are you doing next? How are you using your clinical decision making for the next steps throughout the play therapy process? So that's why what I've decided in 2026, when I do any of my play therapy trainings, because I'm a firm believer in training. I go to trainings. I love trainings. I'm doing a whole training now myself for my own skill development, because we're all lifelong learners, right? So, training is important. And here's what I found. Like, how many times have you thought to yourself, like a month or two after the training ended, you're sitting in front of your clients, maybe you've got an adolescent client, and you're thinking to yourself, oh gosh, what was one of those activities we talked about? Or what was it that they talked about in that training? What does that look like here? Or I'm feeling really stuck. I mean, that happens all the time. So one of the things that I decided that I'm going to do is anyone who takes any of my trainings, they're going to get 60 days for new members. If you're not already in Play Therapy Elevation Circle and you take a training from me, then any of the live trainings that I have coming up, then you're going to have access to 60 days of support from like-minded play therapists, where we're meeting once a month and we're staffing cases and masterminding cases, giving feedback, giving support. So you don't have to do it alone. It's hard work. I mean, I hear all the time about how people these days, play therapists, mental health, just people in general, life feels heavy for a lot of people right now. And this work is hard. I'm doing a training right now for some amazing therapists in Australia, where we're doing attachment focused family play therapy. So I'm doing that work, and we're talking about some of their cases, and it just reminds me how hard these cases are. I just had Play Therapy Academy meetings. We had our consultation meeting last weekend, and talking about really hard cases. We have Elevation Circle mastermind meeting coming up next week, and there's somebody that is going to be presenting a case. It's a hard case. So to me, if we're learning all these things and we're providing these services, then having access to support, I think, makes all the difference, which is why I decided to make sure to include at least 60 days for any new members to Elevation Circle. You'll have access to support. You can keep and stay in there if you want. That's another option, but at least it gives you some support while you're applying what you're learning in the training. Because when you're trying to make sense of what happens in the sessions, what you're doing is you're learning how your clients are using symbolic representation to communicate what's going on. And a lot of times, what I love about expressive arts is that the expressive arts is a way to access those implicit experiences. So those implicit experiences that we don't have conscious access to at this point. So when they say they don't know, maybe they don't know because it's stored away or behind those protected walls where they can't really make sense of it yet. And they need a way to express that non-verbally. And so then what we're doing is we're taking that and making sense of it, looking at the the themes, right? Or what you could call like those energy spots. That's what Eliana Gill, when I took her Santre training a zillion years ago, she would call them energy spots. Like, what is that psychological energy that's getting manifested through that expressive modality? I love that idea. In play therapy, we call them play therapy themes. And that's a learned skill. It's also going to be influenced by your theoretical model. So your framework matters. And so you are making sense of the themes in your client's expressive arts activities based on those your theoretical model. And the thing is, your theoretical model is going to influence what you do with that activity. Here's what I mean by that. Are you interpreting it for your clients or are you not interpreting? Some models are going to, at some point, they're going to want part of the change process is you as a therapist is helping your clients to use that therapeutic process with expressive arts modalities and help to create meaning to it. So helping your clients connect what's going on and what's underlying, what are the roots of what's causing their problems. And you're going to want them to kind of connect the dots with that, so to speak. So where does interpretation play in there? Some modalities, you're not going to do that. There's no interpretation at all. So depending on what theoretical model you're using, it will influence what you do with that theme. The other thing you want to avoid is having clients feel like you're going to psychoanalyze every little detail about the work that they are creating in the play therapy office. And you don't want to treat that expressive arts modality as like a projective test to their unconscious. So we're thinking about it in terms of this is their emotional language. This is their way of communicating through the process, more through right brain processes. And then you're holding that. A lot of times, what I'll say to my clients is you can say as much or as little as you want about what you've created. If they don't want to say anything, I don't ask. And I give them permission not to say anything. And I have to be okay with that because if I'm not okay with that, then they're going to pick up on it. I have to, it's that congruence, right? Unconditional positive regard and acceptance. I have to feel it internally so it'll kind of show itself externally. That's that congruence. And I have to be okay with them saying nothing. That being said, I can learn how to identify the themes of what's going on. That's just going to give me information for my clinical decision making to know where they are in the change process. What are they working on so I can figure out how to help them to do that. But the key is we want to make sure that we are kind of respectful. That ties in with holding that therapeutic space and also ties into your what framework are you using to hold that therapeutic process and guide what you're saying and doing in the session. So through your therapeutic model, whatever your theory model is, it's going to help you make sense of the symbols and the metaphors. How are they using the process therapeutically? Is it, is it working? Is it not working? Do you need to adjust? So that part of it usually, in my experience, requires a little bit of support, ongoing support from a community consultation supervisor, however it is that you're getting support, colleagues who know how to do it as well. And you can run down the hall. I used to do that early on when this is like 25 years ago almost. Before I finally got into play therapy, found somebody, I would go across the hall to my colleague friend and I would say, help, what's going on here? And we'd kind of figure it out together. And she's the one that kind of helped me figure out where to get some training because I hadn't been able to find any. So, and then the last thing to think about, which we've kind of been talking a little bit about already, is using a cohesive play therapy framework. So you want to have that cohesive framework so that it's not feeling like what I call the spaghetti against the wall method, where you're just pulling out anything and everything to see what works or what doesn't work, but it doesn't really make any rhyme or reason. There's no kind of clinical decision strategy that you're grounding it in to kind of guide you to know why are you using which specific activity, what therapeutic power of play are you trying to tap into at this particular stage of change. Why am I using this activity versus another activity based on where are they in that change process? And your theoretical model, your framework, is going to help you figure out how to help your clients access those therapeutic powers of play. And so then when you have that framework, when you get lost, because we all get lost, it's not if you're going to get lost, it's when and how often, and then how do you get back on track. To me, when I feel a little bit lost and I go back to my theory model for my case conceptualization to identify like what is at the roots of this, what is going on with this, and then I think about my play therapy model, and then I think about what stage they're in, and from there I can figure out what activities to pick. So you can see how all of those tie together. So that is it for today. Those are what I have found to be strategic ways of helping clients make progress and using expressive arts in their in the sessions, and using that instead of traditional talk therapy, which I have found to be a lot more helpful. So we're going to do a little bit of recap, which so first thing is setting the stage. How are you introducing the play therapy to your clients? And this requires a little bit of a shift from thinking talking is the only way of helping your clients get better. So we're kind of shifting over to thinking about play therapy in terms of how are we helping them access those therapeutic powers of play, which means we're going to be reframing it as expressive arts. We're using expressive arts, and we have other ways of helping our adolescent clients work through the challenges that they're experiencing. And then we're going to be choosing activities based on their interest, kind of where they are developmentally. If you have a really articulate adolescent, you may want to try one activity versus maybe you have another client who is not very verbal and maybe you're getting the one-word answers. You might want to try something different. I can't tell you how many times in the beginning I have gotten really good buy-in just by pulling out those pre-printed mandalas, having my client pick a mandala. I put on some what I call therapist to be music. I first ask my client, "Hey, are you okay with this music?" Because I have learned from my husband, who hates my therapist-y kind of instrumental spa music, and it's not calming for him. It is very calming for me. So I've just kind of learned not well, like what works for me doesn't work for everybody. So I'll ask my client is, are you okay with this music? And then I'll just let them color. And we might do that for 2 sessions. They might just sit in there coloring because I want their nervous system to be able to settle down and feel safe. And if that's how they have to do it, then that's what I'm going to do. And then how are we holding that therapeutic space? We want them to feel comfortable. We want them to be able to engage those social engagement circuits of feeling safe in the session. So we want to make them feel comfortable. It's a no judgment zone. However you do this is exactly how it needs to be. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You're not going to be rushing it. You're going to be allowing it to unfold in a way that is comfortable for your clients. Safety first, expression first, talking later, or maybe no talking at all. And then how are we making sense? This is where you are learning how to identify themes in whatever has happened. And you're also making sure that you're not kind of creating that atmosphere of you're going to be analyzing every little thing they did. You're just using it to, you're recognizing the themes to help you understand what's going on so you can use that for your decision making about are you on track? Are you not on track? Or, oh, they're, seem to be working through this and it's going to help you figure out what you need to do. How are you involving parents? That's a whole other thing. And maintaining confidentiality. How are you doing all of that? I typically don't go along with the 100% traditional view on that. That's a whole nother topic. But they need to feel safe. They need to make sure it's private. But I also think you need to make sure parents are involved. And I don't keep secrets. So there's ways that we have to manage that. That secrets are different than mandatory reporting things in my book. But how are we managing that? Because ultimately the client needs to feel safe. And then the final thing is using a framework. You don't want to just do anything and everything. Your framework really is your roadmap that helps you figure out what to do and when to do it. Also, how are you making sense of what's going on? It's also going to influence what you say and don't say in your sessions with your adolescent clients. So that is it for today. If you're interested, I have a training coming up. It's coming up on March 7th. It's called Play Therapy with Adolescents Using Expressive Arts. We're going to be using a neuroscience and attachment lens, using an integrative play therapy approach with some of the foundational theoretical lens we're looking through is neuroscience and attachment. So kind of what I talked about a little bit today, looking at things that way. We'll do a lot of that. Like, how are we conceptualizing it? And then a lot of, then how do we do this? So we'll do lots of different activities, experiential activities. There's 2 options. It's in person, so or virtual. You can attend either way. In person will be in southern Utah, which will be beautiful in early March. Or you can attend virtually. There's 2 different registrations. If that time zone doesn't work for you, maybe you're living outside of the US and you're like, oh, that's like in the middle of the night for me. or maybe the date doesn't work for you and you still want to get the information, there is a recorded training option available. So what's going to happen is we're going to do the training, and then after the training, we will take all the recordings and kind of put them in modules, and then you will have access to those around 7 to 10 days after the training ends. But it'll be the recorded version. So either any of those options, if those work for you, and all of those options are going to include 60 days for new members into Play Therapy Elevation Circle, so you can continue getting that ongoing support. You don't have to do it alone. One of the things that I found is being a play therapist can feel really isolating, especially if you're the only one in your practice who's using play therapy, or maybe creative arts or expressive arts, and there's nobody, everybody else is just kind of using the traditional talk therapy or cognitive models, and that you're kind of feeling like you don't have support. And so to me, Play Therapy Elevation Circle is a way to get that support for you. If you're interested though, and you really want some more skill building, a lot more support for skill building with play therapy, I do have openings in Play Therapy Academy. So if you're interested in that, or maybe you're not sure if Elevation Circle or Play Therapy Academy is a good fit, then schedule a 30-minute video call with me and we can help you figure it out. In the training, though, you'll get access to Elevation Circle afterwards, not Play Therapy Academy. That's a separate thing. But I don't always have openings, and I have openings. So if you're interested, feel free to schedule a 30-minute video call with me. And I will make sure to put all of the links for the training in the comments. We will make sure to put links for Play Therapy Academy to schedule the 30-minute video call. If you're interested, pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. It'll be on the training page for the Play Therapy with Adolescents using expressive arts. That training will be on the training page. So you're going to pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. On the training page, look for Play Therapy with Adolescents using expressive arts. And the website is Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training. And I will see you next week. Feel free to message me if you have questions. I love hearing from people about how they're using play therapy. And feel free to ask me any questions about the training. I'm happy to answer those. All righty. I will see you next time. Bye for now.